Charlie, the Migrating Snail. Book 1. The Journey Begins. Read by the author. That's me, Anthony James Donnelly. Copyright 2019. All rights reserved. Chapter 1. Snail Garden. Life was pretty much business as usual in the garden. All the snails went about their daily chores, content in their work. They were happiest if the weather was not too hot and not too cold. There was protection from the birds, and there was plenty of juicy lettuce to munch on. Well, that is, most of the snails were. Charlie was different. He was young and curious. It was his continuous questioning that made his friends nickname him Little Charlie Why, because he seemed far too small to have all these silly questions in his little head. But his head was full of questions. A head full of questions that wanted answers. The new sun was rising in the morning sky as a cool summer breeze blew through the garden. Change was in the air. The sun rays reflected the dewdrops hanging on the moist grass. There was a bumper lettuce crop that year, and all the snails were busily harvesting the leaves ready for the coming winter. All the snails, that was, except Charlie. He had separated himself from the crowd. He wandered alone slowly in his favourite part of the garden, deep in thought. His parents had gone to great lengths to teach their little son to talk and to come out of his shell more, and then regretted it. Hardly a day went by without Charlie asking another question. He wanted to know the answers to everything. Why were snails snails? Why was the sun warm when it shone? Why is there always more to learn? Why? At present he was thinking about a recent event. Uncle Harry, his favourite uncle, had been out late in the heat of the afternoon, a thing snails should never do. Harry was busily minding his own business when all of a sudden that dangerous shadow that snails instinctively know all too well fell across him. Before he had time to react, the large blackbird had swooped. Its beak cracked through his shell like a bullet, and poor old Uncle Harry was carried off into the vast expanse of the sky, never to be seen again. Charlie stopped and looked up at the blanket of cloud that formed the ceiling of the garden. Somewhere up there was his favourite uncle. Only his memory remained in the minds of his relatives back in the confines of the garden. Charlie remembered the interesting tales of adventure he used to tell about his life. If Charlie had been picked on or bullied by the other snails, his stories would always cheer him up. Secretly, Charlie believed that Uncle Harry had just gone off on another special journey somewhere and would return any minute full of even more exciting tales to tell. Charlie's head was still a mass of questions. Why did the birds eat the snails? To him, his questioning was quite normal, and he couldn't understand why the others weren't interested. They all thought he was silly and disruptive to think about such stupid things, especially when there was important work to be done. Even Charlie's parents didn't seem to understand his reason for questioning things. At first they thought his questions were harmless, but as time went on and his questions became harder to answer, Charlie became a nuisance. In the end, they just gave him the same answer. That's life, son. Frank, Charlie's father, was busy working with the other snails on the lettuce plantation as his son slowly wandered past in a daze of thought. Frank stopped briefly and looked down at his poor little son from the large leaf he was working on. Charlie stood staring out into space, his mind seemingly on nothing. "Charlie," called Frank, "will you come up here and give me a hand for a minute?" Charlie gave no answer. His mind was miles away. "Charlie!" He looked up at his father. "Oh no," thought Frank, seeing Charlie's expression, knowing what was coming next. "Dad," began Charlie, "why do all the snails work so hard?" "Son, we'd all love to just drift around like you, but there's important work to be done. Everyone else is happy to help except you," said Frank angrily. "But why?" asked Charlie.